Welcome back to this short series of tutorials on the Python console using runpython.org. This is the second in the series. We talked about using numeric data types in the console in the last tutorial, and this one we're going to be working with strings. So if you haven't already, go to your web browser and type runpython.org into the address or URL window, and that should bring you to this website. You may have to click through a cookies warning to get this. Once you're here, click on the link in the lower right-hand corner that says Run Python Console. And in this console window, we'll be able to type simple Python statements and have them interpreted right away. So in the last tutorial, we looked at numbers as objects that Python understands. The second kind of object that's really important is called strings, and it's just an aggregation or collection of text characters. For example, I'll type a double quote character and some text. Python is named after Monty Python. It's true. What Python does at that point is it reads the text and it takes everything inside the quotation marks and stores that into a little place in computer memory temporarily, and then it gives me back a representation of that. Now notice the representation it gave me was as if I typed it myself, except it gave me it as single quotation mark characters, which is actually kind of significant. What that means is that the type of quotation marks that I used to create the string were not actually stored with the string. And in fact, the quotation marks that you use when defining a string are somewhat arbitrary. I can type this again using single quotation marks, and Python gives it back to me using single quotation marks. Python also lets you use 3 single quotation marks in a row. As long as I follow it with a triple quote, it's cool. And notice again, it's giving me back the same string with single quotation characters. If I type the text without any quotation marks at all, Python will try to interpret it as a Python statement, not the definition of a text object, but actual code. And it's going to run into trouble. This isn't valid Python code. So I get a syntax error. And it's important to mention at this point that as you learn to program in Python or any programming language, you're going to see a lot of syntax errors. For new programming students, there's a tendency when the error pops up, because the language is unfamiliar, and there's often a number of lines involved, people's eyes tend to glaze over and they go, it didn't work. I don't know what's wrong. Often the error itself will point to the problem. Not always, but usually. And it's really good to get in the habit of looking at the errors and trying to understand them. Try to make sense of the error messages that Python gives you. It pays off in the long run. So like we did in the last tutorial, we can also assign text to symbols like variable names. So for example, I could create a variable name called my name and use the equals character. My name is Mr. Eric or equals Mr. Eric. So Mr. Eric, that creates that piece on the right-hand side of the equal sign, creates an object, a string object in the computer's memory. And the symbol, my name, now refers to that. And if I type my name again by itself, Python replies with its expression of that object. So it's the string Mr. Eric with single quotes. Now you can do some simple math-like operations on strings. Whoops, invalid syntax. What's wrong with that line? I typed the name of a symbol and a string without like anything connecting them, like an equal sign. It's a problem. So I tried again. And I should point out, object is kind of a significant word in Python. We probably shouldn't use it as a variable name, but what the heck. Um, let's see, verb. Uh, you know what? I want to do verb typo. In the console, if you make a mistake and you want to retype the same line, press the up arrow key on your keyboard and it will replay the last things that you typed. So I can type, after this little adventure, I can type some math. So my name plus verb plus object. Mr. Eric likes programming. So what this has done is it's taken the text or string objects that these three variable names point to. So my name points to Mr. Eric. Verb points to likes. Object points to programming. And the addition symbol, the plus sign, adds them together. And for strings, that means what's called concatenation. It glues them together in order and creates a new string separate from the other three that consists of the copies of those original strings glued together into a single string. So it created a third object called Mr. Eric Likes Programming. So another thing that we can do, if you're dealing with strings and numbers, sometimes it's nice to be able to convert numbers into strings and strings into numbers. So review, so my name is Mr. Eric. Let's say, and I'll set a variable a equals 1. Now, if you remember from the last tutorial, a equals 1. 1 is a numeric object in memory, and a points to it. So we have two different types of thing that Python has got in its memory temporarily now. We have my name, the string, and a, which is the number 1. So let's try doing math with that. My name plus 1. I'm thinking I'd like to have as like my Eric 1, but Python doesn't actually like that. So similar to what you would see in science, if you try to add numbers together that have different units or a different type, the programming term, you run into trouble. You can't add like miles and gallons. I drove 5 miles with 3 gallons of water. I have 8. That doesn't make any sense. You can't add the 5 and the 3 in this case. They're not the same type of thing. And so adding strings and add to numbers like this similarly doesn't make sense. But I can convert the number into a string. I'll say my name plus. Now, my name plus, I've seen before that I can add strings together. So what I need to add to my name is another string. And if I want to convert a, which points to the number 1, into a string, I can use what's called a function. The function here is str, which is short for string, parenthesis a parenthesis, Mr. Eric 1. So we got to look at in a little more detail about what's going on here with this STRA. Anytime you have a name like str or a variable name, and you follow it with a set of parentheses like that, Python interprets that to mean that you're trying to execute a function. A function is a block of code that will do something. So the str function takes whatever object you pass to it inside the parentheses. It takes that and tries to convert it into a string object by whatever means necessary. So if I give it a number 1, Python will try to convert it into a string that looks the same. It creates a string that has the character 1 in it. Now we can go the other direction. Suppose we have a string consists of numerals. So this looks funny. I have nums. Nums is the string that has a 111 in it. And that's not a number. It's a string. Python does not think of that as a number. If I try to add a number to it, we again get that error from Python saying I can't add numbers to strings. However, we can take the string and we pass it through another function, which will try to convert it into a number. And we have to be specific about what kind of number we want to convert it to. In this case, we'll use the int function, which is short for integer, and we'll pass it the nums variable, which refers to the string that has the 111 in it. And it gives us back a number type. And now we can actually say int nums plus 3, and it will calculate 114 because int nums, int paren nums, is calling this function that converts strings into numbers. It returns or evaluates to the number 111 in this case, and then Python goes on and finishes evaluating this line. So 111 plus 3 is 114. So in a nutshell, those are some of the things you can do with strings and numbers, and gives you a very, very sort of brief introduction to two very basic, very important types in Python, numbers and strings.